This jacket, where did you get it? Where did you get it?
It was my grandfather's.
This is a Medal of Honor jacket. Your grandfather saved my life.
A young recruit stood trembling as her fellow soldiers pointed and laughed at her worn military jacket. But what happened when the commanding general examined that faded patch would silence everyone and reveal a family's greatest sacrifice? Sarah Martinez adjusted the straps of her grandfather's old military jacket as she stepped through the gates of Fort Bradley Training Academy. The October morning air was crisp, carrying the sharp commands of drill sergeants across the vast training grounds. At 19, Sarah was smaller than most recruits, her dark hair pulled back in regulation style, but her brown eyes held a determination that had carried her through countless challenges. The jacket hung loose on her frame, a faded olive-green relic from decades past. The patches were worn, colors dulled by time and wear, but Sarah wore it with quiet pride. It was all she had left of the grandfather who had raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. "Listen up, recruits." Sergeant Morrison's voice boomed across the formation. "Today you'll meet your training unit. These soldiers will be your family for the next 6 months. Look around. These faces better become as familiar as your own reflection." Sarah scanned the sea of crisp uniforms surrounding her. Every other recruit wore pristine fatigues, purchased new for their service. Shiny boots reflected the morning sun, and press creases spoke of preparation and investment. Sarah's jacket, by contrast, looked like a museum piece that had wandered onto active duty. Marcus Rodriguez, a tall recruit from Texas, was the first to notice. He nudged his buddy Jake Wilson, a linebacker-sized young man from Ohio. "Check out the girl with the vintage gear," Marcus whispered, not bothering to lower his voice. "Did she raid a surplus store or something?" Jake snickered, drawing attention from nearby recruits. "Maybe she thinks this is a costume party. That jacket's older than my dad's truck." The whispers spread like ripples in a pond. Sarah felt her cheeks burn as more eyes turned toward her, some curious, others openly amused. She kept her gaze forward, focusing on Sergeant Morrison's instructions, but the weight of their stares pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. "Hey, Martinez," called out Jessica Chun, a sharp-featured recruit from California. "Where'd you get the antique? My grandmother has curtains newer than that jacket." Laughter rippled through the formation. Sarah's hands clenched at her sides, but she maintained her military bearing. Grandfather had always told her, "Mija, when people try to tear you down, you stand taller. Your worth isn't measured by what you wear, but by what you carry in your heart." Sergeant Morrison's whistle cut through the chatter. "Enough talking in formation. You'll have plenty of time to get acquainted during your first exercise. Today we're running combat scenarios. Pair up for buddy assignments." The pairing process was swift and brutal for Sarah. Recruits naturally gravitated toward those who looked the part, crisp, prepared, professional. As partners claimed each other, Sarah found herself standing alone, the last recruit without a match. "Looks like Martinez gets to work solo today," Marcus announced with mock sympathy. "Probably for the best. Wouldn't want that jacket falling apart during the exercise." More laughter followed. Sarah's throat tightened, but she lifted her chin. She could handle being alone. She'd been alone most of her life since grandfather passed 2 years ago. The combat exercise took them through a series of obstacle courses designed to test teamwork, communication, and physical endurance. Sarah watched as paired recruits helped each other over walls, covered each other during mock firefights, and celebrated small victories together. Working alone, Sarah had to be twice as fast, twice as clever. When her jacket snagged on barbed wire during a crawling section, tearing slightly at the shoulder, the watching recruits didn't offer help. They offered commentary. "There goes another piece of history," Jake called out. "Should have left it in the museum where it belongs," Jessica added. But Sarah pressed on. When others needed a boost over the 8-foot wall, she found handholds in the wooden surface and pulled herself up through pure determination. When the mock enemy fire exercise began, she moved with precision that surprised everyone, including herself. By lunch, the mockery had evolved into a running joke. Sarah sat alone in the mess hall, mechanically eating while conversations buzzed around her. I heard Martinez's jacket is so old. It served in 3 different wars, someone said. Maybe it has historical value. We should donate it to the Smithsonian, another voice added. More like goodwill, came the response, followed by fresh laughter. Sarah stared down at her tray, fighting back tears that threatened to embarrass her further. The jacket meant everything to her. It was her connection to the man who had sacrificed his own dreams to raise her, who had worked double shifts at the factory so she could attend community college, who had driven her to the recruitment office with pride shining in his weathered face. That afternoon brought weapons training. As recruits lined up at the firing range, Sarah noticed how the sun caught the worn threads of her jacket's patches. One in particular, near her left shoulder, was so faded it was barely visible, a small unit insignia that grandfather had never talked about, dismissing it with a wave whenever she asked. The afternoon sun was beginning to slant across the training grounds when General Patricia Williams arrived for her weekly inspection. At 55, the general was a legend at Fort Bradley, a woman who had risen through the ranks during an era when female officers faced barriers Sarah could barely imagine. She walked with purposeful strides, her dress uniform immaculate, silver hair perfectly styled beneath her cap. Stars gleamed on her shoulders, and ribbons decorated her chest in neat rows that spoke of decades of distinguished service. General Williams moved through the recruit formations with practiced eyes, pausing to speak with drill sergeants, observing training exercises, and occasionally addressing individual recruits with questions about their preparation and motivation. Sarah was adjusting her rifle sight when she noticed the general approaching her station. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment her substandard appearance would draw official attention and possibly end her military career before it truly began. "Recruit Martinez," General Williams said, her voice carrying the authority of command but without harshness. "How are you finding the training so far?" "It's challenging but rewarding, ma'am," Sarah replied, snapping to attention. The general's eyes swept over Sarah's appearance, and Sarah braced for the inevitable lecture about proper uniforming and equipment standards. But instead of criticism, she saw something unexpected in the general's expression, a slight narrowing of the eyes, as if she were trying to solve a puzzle. "That jacket," General Williams said slowly, stepping closer. "May I ask where you acquired it?" Sarah's stomach dropped. "It belonged to my grandfather, ma'am. I know it doesn't meet current standards, but what was your grandfather's name, recruit?" The general's voice had changed, taking on an intensity that made nearby soldiers pause in their activities. "Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez, ma'am. He served in Vietnam." General Williams went very still, her eyes fixed on the faded patch near Sarah's shoulder, the one Sarah had never been able to identify. "Miguel Martinez," she repeated quietly. "1st Battalion, 75th Rangers?" Sarah blinked in surprise. I'm not sure, ma'am. Grandfather never talked much about his service. He said some stories were better left buried." The general stepped closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Recruit Martinez, that patch on your jacket. Do you know what unit represents?" "No, ma'am. It's too faded to read." For a long moment, General Williams said nothing. Her face had gone pale, and her hands trembled slightly as she reached toward the patch, then stopped herself. Around them, other recruits had begun to notice the unusual interaction, their mockery replaced by curiosity and growing unease. "Sergeant Morrison," General Williams called, her voice carrying across the range. "Please ask all recruits to gather in formation." Immediately, the urgency in her tone sent soldiers scrambling. Within minutes, the entire training company stood at attention, Sarah front and center with the general beside her. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the assembly, and the only sounds were distant artillery practice and the flutter of flags in the wind. General Williams looked out over the assembled recruits, her expression grave. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the formation. "Soldiers, today I want to share with you a story about heroism, sacrifice, and the danger of judging what we don't understand." She paused, placing her hand gently on Sarah's shoulder. This young woman has endured mockery all day because of the jacket she wears. You've called it old, outdated, inappropriate, but you don't know what this jacket represents. The recruits shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware that their behavior was under scrutiny. In 1969, I was a second lieutenant, fresh out of West Point, and convinced I knew everything about warfare. I was assigned to a reconnaissance mission in Vietnam under the command of a staff sergeant who seemed too old, too quiet, too ordinary to be leading elite rangers. That man was Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez. Sarah's eyes widened. She had never heard these details about her grandfather's service. On November 15th, 1969, our unit was ambushed in the jungle near Lock. We were pinned down by superior enemy forces, taking heavy casualties. I was wounded, scared, and certain I was going to die in that jungle. That's when Staff Sergeant Martinez did something I'll never forget. The general's voice grew stronger, carrying across the silent formation. He exposed himself to enemy fire to pull 3 wounded soldiers to safety, including me. He held that position for 47 minutes, allowing our unit to reorganize and call for extraction. He saved 11 lives that day, including mine. A hush had fallen over the entire training area. Even the drill sergeants stood at respectful attention. Staff Sergeant Martinez was recommended for the Medal of Honor, the highest decoration our nation can bestow. But there was a bureaucratic error. His paperwork was lost, his heroic actions were never officially recorded, and he returned home without the recognition he deserved. General Williams turned to face Sarah directly. "Recruit Martinez, your grandfather was one of the finest soldiers I have ever served with. This jacket you wear, it's not old and outdated. It's a symbol of courage, sacrifice, and the kind of character that defines the very best of our military." Tears ran freely down Sarah's cheeks now, but she maintained her military bearing. Around her, the recruits who had mocked her jacket now stood in stunned silence, many looking ashamed of their earlier behavior. "I have carried the story of Miguel Martinez with me for 56 years, the general continued. "I've told it at promotion ceremonies, at military academies, and in my speeches about what it means to serve. But I never had the chance to thank his family personally. Until today." The general reached into her jacket pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. "Sarah Martinez, on behalf of a grateful nation and the 11 soldiers your grandfather saved that day, it is my honor to present you with this." She opened the box to reveal the Medal of Honor, a gold star suspended from a blue ribbon, America's highest military decoration. This medal was finally approved for Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez in 1994, 25 years after his heroic actions. Due to bureaucratic failures, it was never presented to his family. Today, that changes. With ceremony and reverence, General Williams pinned the medal to Sarah's grandfather's jacket. The worn fabric suddenly seemed transformed, no longer old and shabby, but sacred and honored. "Let this be a lesson to all of you," the general addressed the formation. "Never judge a person by their appearance or their circumstances. You never know what stories of courage and sacrifice they carry with them." As the formation was dismissed, the recruits approached Sarah one by one. Marcus Rodriguez was the first. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I had no idea. Your grandfather was a hero. We all are," Jessica Chin added, tears in her eyes. "I feel ashamed of how we treated you." Jake Wilson, the big recruit from Ohio, stood awkwardly before Sarah. "I want to apologize, too. What can we do to make this right?" Sarah looked at each of them, seeing genuine remorse in their faces. "Just remember this lesson," she said softly. "My grandfather always told me that true honor isn't about what you wear on the outside, but what you carry in your heart." From that day forward, Sarah's jacket became a symbol of respect throughout Fort Bradley. New recruits learned the story of Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez and his granddaughter, who wore his legacy with quiet pride. Sarah completed her training at the top of her class, but more importantly, she had taught everyone around her the most valuable lesson of all, that heroes come in all forms, and sometimes the most extraordinary stories are carried by those who seem most ordinary. The jacket still hangs in Sarah's closet today, the Medal of Honor pinned proudly to its worn fabric. A reminder that true honor transcends time, and a grandfather's love can echo through generations to teach lessons about respect, dignity, and the courage to stand tall in the face of judgment. The greatest victories aren't always won on battlefields. Sometimes they're won in the moments when we choose to see the humanity in others and recognize that everyone has a story worth honoring. Have you ever judged someone by their appearance, only to discover an incredible story behind what you saw? Maybe it was someone in worn clothes who turned out to be incredibly successful, or a quiet person who had amazing talents you never expected. Share your story in the comments below. Your experience could inspire someone else to look beyond the surface and find the extraordinary in the ordinary. If this story moved you, please like and share it with someone who needs to remember that everyone carries hidden stories of courage. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories that remind us never to judge a book by its cover. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone wise enough to look closer.